Hello and welcome, dreamers, explorers, and curious souls seeking the wonders out there. Tonight, we will gently step together into a special journey, crossing the cold void, reaching the red sands of Mars, where every grain of dust holds a story billions of years old. Whether you are lying relaxed on your bed, sitting quietly in a corner of your room, or just accidentally stumbling in here, your presence is already a part of this journey. If you want to continue accompanying me on such fascinating journeys, take a second to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. That is the simplest ticket for you not to miss any upcoming adventure. And I promise, if you stay until the end of the video, you will carry with you not only knowledge, but also a fresh perspective on this vast universe. As we set out, imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast plain, faint sunlight filtering through the thin atmosphere filled with red dust. The cold air brushes against your skin. A breath feels difficult, as if the sky itself is struggling to hold on to life. Mars, in that moment, is no longer just a bright dot in the night sky, but a complete world, with history, with memory, with stories to whisper to us. If Earth is the warm home that nurtures life, then Mars is like the quiet brother, standing there from afar, witnessing but never truly touching us. Yet it is precisely that distance, that separation, that has made it a place to nurture human imagination for thousands of years. In ancient nights, when civilizations were still groping their way through the darkness, they looked up at the sky and saw that unusual red point moving among the countless unchanging stars. And they asked themselves, why does it take its own path? Why does it refuse to stand still like the rest of the heavens? Those questions planted the first seeds of the desire to explore the universe. The Babylonians saw in it a god of war. The Greeks and Romans attributed to it the power of gods bound to blood and fire. And then, through thousands of years, from naked eye observations to Galileo's first telescope, Mars gradually revealed that it was not a mythological symbol, but a world. A planet with a surface, with day and night, with polar ice, and perhaps once holding oceans. Here we begin to see a beautiful paradox, a small, cold, barren planet, and yet it becomes the mirror reflecting humanity's great aspirations. Looking at Mars, we do not only see a red planet, we see ourselves in the journey of seeking meaning. Every retrograde motion in the night sky, every mystery of its reddish hue, is a reminder that the universe does not stand still, and neither should we. Yet what makes Mars special is not only its image in human imagination, but also the geological story carved deep into every grain of dust. About 4 billion years ago, Mars may have been very different. It is believed to have once had rushing rivers, vast lakes, even blue oceans covering its surface. The evidence lies in valleys stretching hundreds of kilometers, ancient riverbeds now dry, and minerals that could only form in the presence of water. So what turned a once potentially rich world into the cold desert it is today? The answer lies in its modest size. A small mass meant that Mars's core cooled faster, volcanic activity weakened, and with it, its magnetic field disappeared. Without the magnetic shield for protection, the atmosphere was gradually stripped away by the solar wind over time. And so, layer by layer, the air, the water, the warmth all left the planet, leaving behind a barren world. But let us reflect for a moment. It is precisely in that loss that Mars offers us a great lesson. It reminds us that life, balance, and the things we take for granted on Earth are in fact incredibly fragile. If a sibling planet just tens of millions of kilometers away has gone through such collapse, then can Earth be immortal? Or one day, will we also have to learn to face the finiteness of our own planet? The more scientists study Mars, the more they feel this truth deeply. The giant impact craters, volcanoes nearly 3 times higher than Everest, canyons that could swallow entire countries, all are evidence that Mars was once alive, once fierce, once changing endlessly. But now it is silent, covered in red dust, like a giant book opened in the middle of the universe, waiting for humanity to read. And humans, of course, cannot resist the invitation. From the humble telescopes of the 17th century, we have advanced to the point of sending metal ships across space, landing on its ground, rolling across valleys, digging into the soil, and sending back millions of images to Earth. Each photo is a piece of a story gradually coming together. Perhaps today Mars is only a desolate place, but it makes us wonder, could tomorrow, this place become our second home? Will one day humans stand atop Olympus Mons, watching the sun set beyond the red horizon, and remember that it all began with a tiny dot of light in the ancient sky? So, as you lie back and listen to this journey, let Mars remind you that every speck of dust, every planet, every light in the sky carries within it a story. And if we are patient enough to listen, those stories can change the way we see ourselves. If you could step onto the surface of Mars today, you would see a world so silent it takes your breath away. But beneath that red dust, the remaining traces tell us another story. A story of a planet once young, full of energy, and perhaps once familiar with the gentleness of flowing water. Rivers that now exist only as dry channels once meandered, converged, and rushed toward vast lowlands. The deltas at the mouths of Jezero or Eberswalde craters are not only remnants of ancient flows, but also resemble stone diaries, where each grain of sediment stacked in layers over thousands of years. These are the silent evidence that Mars was once a vibrant, dynamic planet. The strange thing is this: Mars did not simply dry out and remain the same. The planet seems to have gone through complex climatic rhythms. There were times when it was warm, with enough atmospheric pressure to keep water flowing freely. Then there were times when it was freezing cold, arid, turning the surface into an icy desert. Some scientists call this the breathing of Mars's climate, profound cycles of change shaped by its orbit, by volcanic eruptions, and by the gradual theft of its atmosphere by the sun. Each of these phases left its own mark on the surface. From orbit, those lines look like wrinkles on an aging face, recording both the youth and the decline of the planet. Among the greatest mysteries, one cannot ignore the Borealis Ocean, the hypothesis that the giant basin in Mars's northern hemisphere once held a shallow ocean. If this is true, it means half the planet was once covered in water, forming shorelines, waves, and perhaps even some microscopic ecosystems. From above, the northern hemisphere's terrain appears unusually flat, in stark contrast with the crater-filled southern hemisphere. This very contrast has led many scientists to believe that billions of years ago, a catastrophic impact carved out the Borealis Basin, and afterward liquid water filled it, turning it into a vast ocean. Though still debated, the thought that Mars once had seas always sends a shiver down our spine. For where there is water, there is at least some chance for life. But water is not the only storyteller. Rocks are loyal witnesses as well. Layers of mineral-rich deposits, such as clays and sulfates, show that complex chemical reactions once occurred between rock and water. Clay, in particular, is a mineral that forms slowly, requiring the long-term presence of neutral water. It is like a whisper. Here, water lingered long enough to change the very nature of stone. Meanwhile, the sulfate layers reveal another phase, when water began turning acidic, when the planet was slowly losing its warmth and stability. These changes are not just mineral fossils, but also a climate record imprinted over billions of years. If we look back at Earth during the same era, the comparison is truly overwhelming. Around 3.5 to 4 billion years ago, both planets experienced violent impacts, volcanic eruptions, and perhaps both knew the existence of liquid water. But Earth was larger, with stronger gravity, holding on to its atmosphere and magnetic field. Thanks to that, water did not vanish, but instead gathered into vast oceans, where life emerged. Mars, however, was different. Smaller, it lost heat quickly, lost its magnetic field, and eventually lost its atmosphere. Instead of becoming a green paradise, it turned into a red desert. And so, two planets that once had similar beginnings diverged into two very different destinies. This also raises a haunting question. If life could appear quickly on Earth, might it have once flickered, even briefly, on Mars? Perhaps tiny microbes, dwelling in lakes, hiding in mud, or surviving underground where briny water and leftover warmth from the mantle persisted. We have yet to find direct evidence, but every geological trace is whispering that the opportunity once existed. And if that is true, then Mars is not just a dead planet, but one that once breathed, once lived, once had a glorious youth. Today, as rovers like Perseverance and Curiosity slowly roll across its rugged surface, we are turning the pages of a fossil diary. Every rock, every layer of sediment could be a handwritten line in the planet's history. Perseverance, for instance, is collecting rock cores at Jezero, once a river delta. Who knows? Inside them may lie ancient organic molecules, the first building blocks of life. Meanwhile, curiosity diligently climbs Mount Sharp, examining each sediment layer as if reading chapter by chapter of a book. The silence of Mars today is not a full stop, but a comma. It invites us to imagine, to question, and to listen to the whispers of a distant world. Every image from orbit, every sample from a rover brings us a little closer to answering the great question, are we alone? And perhaps the red planet has kept that answer hidden for billions of years, waiting for the moment humanity becomes curious and patient enough to listen. When Mars's magnetic field faded, the change was not simply a matter of a few numbers in pressure or temperature. It was a fateful turning point. Imagine this: a once warm planet wrapped in a thick atmosphere where rivers and lakes sparkled under the distant sun, suddenly becoming a cold, barren, and desolate world. In that very moment when Mars lost its invisible armor, it began a long journey into loneliness. This leaves us with a haunting question. Could Mars once have been a second Earth? Geological evidence shows the presence of ancient plains, eroded valleys, and minerals formed in salty water, all strong hints that this planet once had flowing streams and perhaps even a primitive ecosystem. But then those flows ceased. The temperature dropped, the atmosphere escaped, and the remaining traces are only like scattered memories etched onto the body of the planet. One of the most haunting images when thinking of Mars is its silence. On Earth, wherever you go, from forests and coasts to deserts, there are always sounds: the wind, the waves, the rustle of leaves, even the buzzing of insects. On Mars, the thinness of the atmosphere means that even the wind cannot sing like it does at home. Dust particles float and collide during storms that can last for months, yet they cannot produce the thunderous roars of Earth's tempests. There, silence is the background sound. And in that silence, it feels as though the planet is whispering a story billions of years long. Human Explorers spacecraft have been trying to listen to that story. The Maven orbiter, the Curiosity rover, or Perseverance, all are our modern eyes and ears. They are not just collecting dry data, they are trying to recover memories, to reconstruct a lost timeline. Because if Mars once had an ocean, once had rivers and lakes, and once had a thick atmosphere, then its loss of all that is a mirror reflecting the fragility of worlds, including Earth. But science does not stop at regret. Scientists also find hope in tiny traces, buried pockets of ice, mineral-rich layers of salts, and clay minerals, which only form in the long-term presence of water. These clues suggest that even though Mars's surface is harsh, deep beneath the red soil there may still exist pockets of liquid water, where microbial life could take refuge. Imagine this: in the darkness kilometers beneath the surface, where the planet's internal heat still lingers, there could be a sanctuary for life. Not life as radiant as Earth's green forests, but tiny, resilient microbes, enduring just as life began on our own planet billions of years ago. The thought that somewhere beneath that red soil life might still exist transforms Mars from a dead world into one with potential, a place whose story is not yet finished. That is why, when the rovers crawl slowly across the dusty valleys, their wheels leave not only tracks on the soil, but also marks in the history of human science. Every rock sample drilled, every grain of soil analyzed could become a vital clue to the question humanity has always carried: are we alone in this universe? At the same time, Mars's story reflects another layer of meaning, a reminder for Earth. For when we look at the red planet, we recognize the fragility of atmosphere, of magnetic fields, and of the conditions necessary for life to exist. Mars once had it all, and then lost it. Our Earth is not immune to climate change, to forces that can erode its delicate ecosystems. Learning from Mars is also learning how to protect our own green home. And there is yet another aspect, the aspiration to explore. For many, Mars is not only an object of study, it is a symbol of humanity's spirit of conquest. For setting foot on Mars will be the first time humankind leaves the cradle of Earth to build another home. When Elon Musk speaks of the first cities on Mars, or when NASA prepares for crewed missions, it is not just about technological ambition. It is also about the belief that we can continue writing the unfinished story of the red planet. But to achieve that, we must first understand Mars. Not only with scientific numbers, but with empathy, with the ability to listen to its whispers. Because once we understand this planet's past, we can begin to imagine its future, both for Mars and for humanity itself. Mars is a planet that carries within itself a fierce contrast, both desolate and familiar, hauntingly quiet, yet violent with dust storms that can engulf an entire world. And among all the elements that shape its strange character, nothing is more persistent and enduring than dust, the tiny substance that can define not only the appearance, but even the fate of the red planet. In a place where the air is too thin to lift a kite, particles smaller than a human hair can drift for weeks, even months in the atmosphere. They do not only create the pervasive reddish hue, but also serve as a natural journal, preserving the geological history of billions of years of upheaval. Each speck carries with it a fragment of rock shattered by wind, ice, and time, like grains in the universe's colossal hourglass, flowing endlessly until the planet can no longer breathe. But dust is not only the past, it is also a living storyteller of the present. Dust devils, taller than skyscrapers, wider than stadiums, sweep across plains, leaving dark streaks on the surface like the signature strokes of the wind. From afar, they seem gentle, like a slow dance of light and motion. But in reality, they lift dust high, scattering it across vast distances, altering the atmosphere's temperature in ways not to be underestimated. When solar energy is trapped by this dusty veil, the planet's climate can be disrupted. A clear reminder that even the smallest things can create massive impacts when given enough time. Every few years, Mars undergoes an extreme phenomenon, global dust storms. No longer just a lonely whirlwind over some distant valley, dust at that time envelops the entire planet, turning it into an opaque sphere stripped of all detail. Imagine standing on the surface, looking up, and realizing you can no longer see the sun, only a murky orange glow covering everything. For humans, it is a terrifying darkness. For machines, is a death sentence. It was just such a storm in 2018 that ended Opportunity's journey, the rover that had faithfully accompanied us for nearly 15 years. It did not break down, nor suffer a major technical failure. It simply fell into eternal sleep, smothered by dust and deprived of the warmth needed to sustain its mechanical life. That was one of those moments, both tragic and humbling, a reminder that Mars does not welcome us, it merely tolerates us temporarily. And yet, here lies the paradox. Though harsh and dangerous, dust is also what creates the surreal beauty of this planet. When the sun's faint light passes through a thin layer of dust, it paints the sky a pale butter color by day and shifts it into a strange blue during sunset. If sunsets on Earth are explosive paintings of red, orange, and purple, then sunsets on Mars are like a soft breath, gentle, fleeting, almost a whisper. A deep blue silence, lasting only minutes, but enough to make the observer's heart ache. Thin clouds of ice crystals drift in the rusty sky as though the planet is wrapped in a delicate veil. They scatter sunlight into pastel bands of purple, blue, and pink, colors that do not belong to a dead planet, but rather to the lingering dream of a world once warmer, more alive. In some regions, black sand dunes intertwine with red dust to form spectacular patterns, resembling abstract paintings drawn by the hand of the wind. Behind this beauty, dust also carries a scientific promise. Researchers believe that within those ultrafine grains may lie traces of biological past. If microbial life ever existed, its chemical relics may have been ground down by winds and preserved within the fine layers of dust. To uncover this would mean we had traced a chapter not only of Mars's history, but of life itself in the universe. But dust is also an inevitable challenge for future humans. No matter how sophisticated, spacesuits will have to contend with the adhesion and corrosive nature of tiny iron oxide particles. Each excursion outside could carry dust back into living quarters, where it risks harming lungs or air filtration systems. Every solar panel, every machine may eventually be covered, forcing humans to constantly adapt or fight against it. Martian dust never disappears, it only moves from plane to canyon, from sky to machinery, from a spacesuit into a habitat. Perhaps, of all challenges, dust is the fairest test Mars gives us, whether humanity can learn to adapt to the smallest yet most persistent things, or be subdued by these invisible fine grains. Looking at Mars today, we see a lesson that requires no words. It is written in the red expanse across its surface, in the haze obscuring its horizon, and in the silence of a planet that has lost its lungs. Martian dust, in all its contradictions, is both the memory of a world once green, the background music of a lonely planet, and the riddle of the future. And as those tiny particles continue to drift through the fragile atmosphere, they seem to whisper to us that this planet has never stopped telling its story. All we have to do is listen. Leaving behind the colossal canvas of Valles Marineris, let your imagination glide across the endless red plains of Mars. Here, the atmosphere is so thin that it cannot hold our breath, yet it is sufficient to nurture a magnificent natural phenomenon, planetary dust storms. On Earth, sandstorms may cover a few hundred kilometers, but on Mars, dust storms can engulf the entire planet. When storms rise, dust particles as fine as powder spread through the air, reflecting sunlight and turning day into a kind of murky twilight. Imagine standing on the plains and within just a few hours, the horizon vanishes. The whole world drifts in a pale red haze, and you realize that nature here is not only grand, but also profoundly alien. Strangely enough, these very dust particles are the planet's silent historians. They contain minerals eroded by winds over millions of years, bearing traces of both volcanoes and water. Under a microscope, a single dust grain can tell the story of cooled lava of once flowing streams and of chemical reactions that occurred as the atmosphere gradually lost its warmth. On a planet that seems lifeless, dust is the most vivid memory. But Mars is not only dust. Hidden beneath the frozen soil lies another treasure, water ice. From the polar caps to underground ice deposits, water once existed everywhere. At the poles, you can see dazzling white ice caps, reminiscent of Antarctica on Earth, though made mostly of frozen carbon dioxide. When summer arrives, this thin layer of ice sublimates, forming hazy clouds, while deeper water ice patiently remains. Some impact craters have accidentally revealed this ice. Beneath a thin layer of dust lies a shiny, glass-like surface reflecting sunlight. The sight is as if you had just discovered a hidden gem in the desert. It is precisely the traces of once flowing water on the surface that open a new chapter in the story of Mars. Dry river channels, spiral valleys, and ancient alluvial plains all are evidence that once upon a time this planet was far warmer and wetter. Images from probes show signs of rivers that once rushed, craters once filled with lakes, and even oceans that may have stretched across the northern lowlands. If Earth was born to hold blue oceans, then Mars was the unfinished dream of a water world. The question that troubles scientists is not whether water existed, but where it went. The atmosphere thinned, the solar wind blew water away, and the rest froze deep underground, a transformation that turned this planet from Earth's close sibling into a cold desert wasteland. And it is precisely here, in that emptiness, that the most compelling question arises. Did life ever exist on Mars? Exploration robots like Curiosity and Perseverance are not just searching for rocks and minerals. They are listening for echoes of biological history. Microfossils, chemical traces of organic carbon, or merely evidence of once habitable conditions. The answer remains open, but every rock sample, every grain of soil is being carefully studied, like puzzle pieces in a game that may last centuries. Looking further, Mars offers us a mirror reflecting Earth itself. This planet was once warmer, with a thicker atmosphere, rivers, lakes, and rain, yet it lost everything. If life ever sparked, it may have been extinguished in a slow but irreversible process. When we look at Mars, we are not only seeing another world, but also glimpsing a possible future if Earth were to lose its fragile balance. Perhaps the most important lesson the red planet teaches us is the fragility of life. But the story does not end in sorrow. The silence and desolation of Mars ignite the grandest imagination. Can we turn it into a new home? Concepts like terraforming, planetary engineering, or building domed bases may sound like science fiction, but today they have become goals pursued by both space agencies and private companies. If humans set foot on Mars, that first step on the red sands will not only be a triumph of science, but also a declaration. We can bring life to worlds that have long slept. Imagine a small city on the plains of Elysium, sheltered beneath a transparent dome where children can watch the two moons, Phobos and Deimos, sweep across the fragile sky. Verdant hydroponic fields glowing under artificial lights, rovers moving slowly across dusty terrain, and in the distance, Olympus Mons standing tall like a guardian deity of a new era. That is not just science, it is aspiration, the expansion of human imagination. From colossal extinct volcanoes to a canyon the length of a continent, From dust sweeping everywhere to the faintest traces of water, Mars is a treasury of untold stories. It is both witness to the past, mirror of the present, and perhaps stage of the future. When we look at the red planet, we do not see only rocks and sand. We see humanity's boundless yearning to explore, the relentless urge to understand, to question, and to journey ever farther. At first glance, Phobos and Deimos may look like lifeless rocks drifting through space, but it is precisely their modest size and irregular shapes that reveal a fascinating story about the distant past of the solar system. Somewhere within those rugged surfaces, fragments of cosmic history still remain like frozen memories not yet fully told. Phobos, whose name means fear, carries a somber and intense aura. It orbits Mars at a distance of just over 6,000 kilometers, closer than any other natural satellite in the solar system to its host planet. Because of this, Phobos's orbit is gradually decaying, moving a few centimeters closer to Mars every century. One day, millions of years from now, Phobos may break apart under gravitational forces and form a faint dust ring around the red planet. That thought evokes both fragility and a spectacular vision of eternal change in the cosmos. By contrast, Deimos, terror, has a quieter nature. It orbits farther away, about 23,000 kilometers from Mars, moving slowly across the hazy sky. To an observer on the surface, Deimos would appear little more than a faint star, briefly peeking above the horizon before disappearing. Yet it is this modesty that gives Deimos its own beauty. A silent witness, drifting for billions of years, unassuming but enduring. Scientists have long debated, are these two moons captured children from the asteroid belt, or remnants of a colossal impact that once blasted part of Mars into orbit? Both hypotheses hold weight. The dark surfaces and chemical compositions of Phobos and Deimos resemble carbonaceous asteroids from the outer solar system, but their stable orbits make many lean toward the ancient impact scenario. In that case, these two moons are like fragments of Mars's memory, mirrors reflecting the violent moment that shaped the planet's face. What makes Phobos and Deimos fascinating is not only their origin, but also their potential in the future. With weak gravity, dusty surfaces, and small size, both moons are ideal destinations for testing space travel technologies. A base on Phobos, for instance, could serve as a crucial staging post, a docking point for spacecraft before descending to Mars. Its soft surface, blanketed with regolith, the ancient cosmic dust, could provide material for future extraterrestrial resource extraction technologies. Even bolder ideas suggest that humans could use Phobos as a natural shield. Establishing a science station on this tiny moon would give astronauts some protection from direct cosmic radiation, while still offering a sweeping view of Mars. From Phobos, the red planet would nearly fill the entire sky, a majestic sight no one has ever seen with their own eyes. Nevertheless, both Phobos and Deimos present no small challenges. Their weak gravity makes landing and movement difficult. With just a strong jump, an astronaut could escape the surface and drift into space. Their fine, possibly electrically charged dust also poses technical hurdles. Yet within these challenges lies opportunity. Each step upon them would unlock new knowledge, not only about the moons themselves, but also about the evolution of the entire Martian system. If we imagine further, the presence of these small moons carries symbolic meaning. On Earth, our moon has always been a source of endless inspiration for poetry, music, and science. On Mars, Phobos and Deimos, though tiny and dim, could become beacons for dreams of space exploration. They remind us that even the smallest objects in the universe have roles to play, each with its own story worth listening to. From another perspective, Phobos and Deimos can be seen as natural clocks. Phobos' orbit is collapsing inward, while Deimos is slowly drifting away. These opposite directions are like the hands of a clock ticking the future of the Martian system. They make us acutely aware that everything in the universe is constantly changing, from the tiniest dust grains to entire planets. One day, when humans set foot on Phobos, they may witness the sunrise over Mars's horizon, its faint light reflecting across rugged, dusty ridges. In that moment, we would not only see a moon, but also see ourselves, cosmic travelers, always yearning to overcome fear and terror in search of knowledge and hope. In this way, Phobos and Deimos are not merely small satellites orbiting a distant planet. They become symbols of humanity's journey. Small yet enduring, fragile yet resilient, always circling around the aspiration to understand the universe and to find our place within its vast tapestry. The sounds on Mars are not just technical data sent back to Earth, they are a new breath that opens up human imagination. Each time Perseverance's microphone is switched on, what we hear is not simply the wind blowing through metallic gaps, but the whisper of another world, a world that had remained silent for billions of years, until we came close and pressed our ears to its surface. That silence, when cut through by a passing breeze or the sound of the rover's own wheels rolling, feels like listening to a simple yet haunting melody where every note is a resonance between life and absence. Scientists realize that Mars's thin air makes sound travel in a way completely different from Earth. The atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide, nearly 100 times thinner than the air around us. That makes sound move slower, weaker, and distorted in strange ways. A noise may reach your ears a little later, muffled, as if its energy was drained on its journey through the rusty red atmosphere. Even different frequencies travel at different speeds. High-pitched sounds arrive first, while deep tones trail behind. This has never been experienced on Earth. If you were to talk to someone standing a few dozen meters away on Mars, their voice would sound distorted, as if echoing from a peculiar corridor, a nearly surreal experience. The microphones also captured sounds brought by humans to this planet. The crunch of Perseverance's wheels grinding against dry gravel, the drilling mechanism boring into ancient rock to extract cores, the faint vibration of metal in the thin air. Normally, these are just mechanical noises, but in the near absolute silence, each sound resonates like the first signs of life in an abandoned cathedral. Listeners feel as though the planet is responding, as if its surface knows that something else has finally arrived, stirring the space that has slumbered for billions of years. Among these precious sounds, the most striking is the helicopter, Ingenuity's takeoffs and landings. It was the first time a human-made aircraft flew in the atmosphere of another planet. The whirring of its blades was not only technical data, but also a symbol of a turning point. Humanity had not only set robotic wheels on Mars, but also brought the ability to fly. Strangely, its sound was almost paper-thin, faint, because the air was too thin to carry strong vibrations. Yet that fragility evokes a sense of delicacy, a carbon and titanium instrument performing the first music piece in an alien sky. The music of Mars, if one can call it that, resembles nothing on Earth. It is woven from long stretches of silence, whispering breezes, and the slow sounds of machinery. Listening closely, it feels like a minimalist symphony where silence itself is the main score. Each gust of wind is a fleeting melody, and once it fades, quietness immediately floods back, filling the void. This contrast gives the impression that the entire planet is keeping rhythm, waiting for something greater. Beyond its poetic beauty, these recordings hold profound practical scientific value. Sound helps researchers measure atmospheric density, temperature, and changes over time. The echoes of a laser beam striking rock reveal the internal structure of the material. Even the faint whistling of wind through gaps allows them to imagine how dust particles drift and storms form. A microphone, seemingly simple, has become a new sensory tool helping humanity read the unopened pages of Mars. For ordinary people, the value of sound lies at another level. It makes the planet feel closer. When we only look at images, Mars remains distant, cold, and hard to imagine. But when we hear the wind blowing, the crunch of wheels, the faint buzz of a helicopter, we suddenly feel as if we are standing right there, breathing the thin air and gazing up at the pale pink sky. Sound awakens a primal human memory. To listen is to feel present. And that is what turns Mars from a remote concept into a tangible place. Imagine in the future when settlers live on the red planet. In the mornings, they will open their dome windows and hear the first wind passing through valleys. Their footsteps will echo dully on the brittle soil. Conversations, laughter, even music from a guitar carried from Earth, all will blend into Mars' silence, extending a symphony once played only by wind and sand. And one day, when children run under protective domes and their laughter echoes outward, this planet will no longer be a silent world. The sounds of Mars, therefore, remind us that the journey of space exploration is not just dry science. It is a sensory experience, a way for us to connect with other worlds through our own senses. Hearing Martian wind through a microphone, we are not only studying the physics of an atmosphere, but also listening to an ancient story. A story of a planet that once had rivers, once had a dense atmosphere, and now only leaves behind faint echoes. That whisper seems to say that Mars is still alive, only sleeping, waiting to be awakened. In recent decades, the idea of setting foot on Mars has moved away from the pages of science fiction to come closer to scientific reality. Robotic missions have become cautious preludes, like sending out scouts to explore the way. Each lander, each rover is not only a research tool, but also the eyes and ears substituting for humans on a distant planet. They have painted a detailed picture of the Martian surface, pointing out ancient dried up rivers, plains that were once lake beds, and sediment layers that tell the long story of water. As these fragments gradually fit together, we begin to see something clear. Mars is not an entirely alien place. It is a world that once held conditions under which life on Earth had begun. But from observing it to setting foot on it lies an enormous gap. A journey to Mars is unlike any voyage humanity has ever undertaken. The moon is only a few days' flight away, whereas Mars lies at an average distance of more than 200 million kilometers. Depending on orbital positions, travel can take from 6 to 9 months. During that time, the crew would have to live in a spacecraft not much larger than a small apartment, facing cosmic radiation, microgravity, and the loneliness of a solitary journey through the dark void. There can be no turning back if something goes wrong. Once past halfway, Earth becomes a distant blue dot, no longer a place to immediately return to. That is why planning a manned mission to Mars is not just a matter of rocket engineering. It is a comprehensive experiment with human survival in an entirely new environment. We must ask, how can astronauts have enough water, enough oxygen, enough food for a journey lasting years? How can they maintain mental health under prolonged isolation? And how can they land safely on a planet with an atmosphere too thin to slow descent with parachutes, yet too thick to treat as a vacuum? These questions are not only technical, but touch upon the essence of human aspiration. How much are we willing to pay to step beyond familiar boundaries? Some solutions have been proposed. Scientists are studying technologies to produce resources on site, known as ISRU, in situ resource utilization. Instead of carrying everything from Earth, the idea is to use Mars's own resources, extracting oxygen from its carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere, mining underground ice for fuel and drinking water, even using soil to 3D print building materials. The MOXIE experiment on the Perseverance rover has demonstrated this principle. It successfully created pure oxygen from Mars's CO2. That is only a beginning, but enough to show a feasible vision. If we want to stay long term, the planet could sustain us, at least at a basic level. However, survival is one thing. Building a small civilization on Mars is another challenge. Images of glass domes shimmering under the red sky, once confined to novels, are now appearing as blueprints on engineers' desks. Concepts of habitats, living houses, are simulated in closed environments with radiation shielding, water and air recycling systems, even greenery to create a sense of familiarity. On Earth, experiments like Biosphere 2 or isolated living projects have shown that humans can sustain a closed ecosystem, though it is far from easy. But on Mars, this would not just be an experiment. It would be a condition for survival. Another equally important aspect, human psychology. A journey hundreds of millions of kilometers away challenges not only the body, but also the mind. Isolation, monotonous rhythms, and communication delays of up to 20 minutes between Mars and Earth would make the crew almost entirely self-reliant. There is no room for immediate dependence on those back home. Every decision must be made on the spot, with absolute trust in one another's abilities. Therefore, Mars is not only a technical challenge, it is a test of humanity's ability to cooperate and endure. But precisely here, within these harsh limits, lies the allure of the Mars dream. For if we succeed, it would prove that humans can overcome every natural boundary. Mars is not just a planet, it is the ultimate test of human adaptability and creativity. Every step on its red soil would not only be a triumph of engineering, but also evidence that we have learned how to live in a completely different world. And as that vision becomes more realistic, people begin to think further. What will happen when the first children are born on Mars? They will grow up in an artificial atmosphere, under a pink-orange sky, hundreds of millions of kilometers away from the ancestral homeland of their forebears. Will they see Earth as the land of their ancestors, or will they develop their own identity, a Martian culture with its own language, music, and art? Human history has never witnessed anything like that. If it happens, it would be an unprecedented expansion of the human story. Of course, everything still lies in the future. But right now, every audio recording from Perseverance, every data packet sent back from orbit is weaving that story. The whispers of Mars do not only show us a cold planet, but also whisper about humanity's ability to reach far. If we know how to listen, we will realize that the dream of touching Mars is no longer a question of whether we can, but is gradually becoming when will we do it? For decades, every spacecraft that has landed or rolled across the red planet has been like a new chapter in humanity's shared epic. If the earliest envoys only stopped at sending back blurry black and white images, then recent generations have opened up an entire vivid panorama, making us feel as if we were standing right there on the rust-colored ground. There, every grain of dust contains the story of billions of years of geological evolution. Every rock may hold traces of a lost ocean. What makes Mars special is not only its austere beauty, but also its ability to evoke fundamental questions. Is life truly an exception of the universe or merely the inevitable outcome of chemical and physical laws? When Perseverance drilled into the bedrock of Jezero and stored the first core samples, humanity seemed to be holding in its hands a part of history that had never been written down. Those fragments of matter, perhaps weighing only a few hundred grams, carry the potential to change entirely how we see our place in the universe. If within them exist complex organic compounds or signs of ancient microorganisms, it would prove that life is not a unique rarity. Earth would no longer be a lonely exception, but only one of many homes for life. Even if the final results deny the existence of any organisms, that very silence itself carries immense meaning. It shows the fragile and rare trajectory life must take in order to emerge. However, science does not stop at the search for lost life. Current studies also focus on exploiting the potential of the red planet for the future. The idea of using water ice to produce rocket fuel or turning carbon dioxide in the atmosphere into breathable oxygen is no longer a vague fantasy. They have already been tested, even if only on a small scale, by instruments like MOXIE on Perseverance. Every gram of oxygen created on the Martian surface is a step towards self-sufficiency, a promise that one day soon permanent bases could truly operate without complete dependence on supplies from Earth. Yet the allure of Mars does not lie only in its technical or scientific aspects. It is also a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest aspiration, the desire to expand boundaries. Since humans first left their caves, crossed mountains, oceans, and vast spaces, we have always been driven by a common question: what lies beyond? The red planet is the greatest beyond we have ever faced. It carries within it challenges no different from when our ancestors once launched frail wooden boats across seas, except this time the ocean is the cold, endless expanse of space. The presence of rovers also raises an intriguing philosophical issue. Are they the trailblazers for us? In a sense, they are indeed extensions of human senses and intellect. Spirit, opportunity, or perseverance are not lifeless blocks of metal, but representatives of aspiration, patience, and the belief that even in absolute solitude, exploration has value. When a rover exhausts itself after years of battling dust storms, we see not only the end of a mission, but also our own fragility and resilience reflected within it. On another level, the story of exploring Mars also recalls the issue of the long-term future of civilization. Some thinkers argue that setting foot on another planet is not only a scientific achievement, but also an inevitable step to ensure humanity's survival. Earth, though abundant and beautiful, is a finite planet, vulnerable to natural disasters, climate change, or even cosmic threats such as asteroid impacts. Mars, though harsh, could become a plan B, a backup seed for life. But at the same time, warnings about the risk of overexploitation or repeating the ecological mistakes once made on Earth compel us to be more cautious than ever. In the coming years, many bold projects are being prepared. National space agencies and private companies have already mapped out plans for crewed missions, expected to take place as early as the next decade. The image of astronauts in silver white suits setting their first steps on the dusty red land is no longer a distant dream. Even so, this journey will not only be about technology or adventure, but also about culture and spirit. When a flag is planted, it should not only be the symbol of one nation, but a milestone for all humanity, because Mars, like the starry sky above, belongs to all of us. Perhaps the greatest value of the journey to Mars does not lie in the destination, but in the way it forces us to reflect upon ourselves. Panoramic images from orbit showing the small red planet drifting in darkness echo the image of the blue Earth from Apollo long ago. They remind us that we are not merely citizens of one nation or one continent, but citizens of one world. And in that moment, borders, wars, or petty divisions become so much smaller compared to the common challenge waiting out there. Mars whispers to us through its very silence that the vast universe still holds countless mysteries yet to be uncovered, that humanity's future can be written further by our own hands and intellect. Every rover wheel rolling on red dust, every drop of water extracted from thin air, every dream of domed homes rising in frozen valleys, all are testaments to the boundless power of imagination and belief. And perhaps that is the deepest meaning of this journey. Not just to find a new place to live, but to find a new way to define ourselves. Throughout history, few planets have been as close yet as distant to our imagination as Mars. From the very first primitive observations with the naked eye, humanity has been captivated by its faint red glow, a red reminiscent of blood, of war, of primal ferocity. That is why, in most civilizations, Mars has always been associated with conflict, power, and instability. The Romans saw it as the protective god of Rome, like a force not only guiding the army, but also safeguarding the order of the entire empire. To them, Mars was both fear and pride. Meanwhile, in Greek culture, Ares, the counterpart of Mars, was portrayed as chaotic, hot-tempered, a warlike being that even the other gods hesitated to approach. But Mars is not only a symbol of war. In the East, it was also tied to fate and the volatility of human life. In Indian astrology, Mangala, the red planet, symbolizes energy, will, and also discord. For the ancient Babylonians, it was Nergal, the god of plague and fire, the embodiment of a force that could both destroy and purify. Whether in the West or the East, the image of Mars always carried an extreme hue, a flame that could not be ignored in the cosmic tapestry. As humanity entered the modern era, its curiosity was fueled by astronomical technology. The first telescopes brought people a new vision of the red planet. On its surface, observers noticed dark streaks, bright spots at the poles, and especially straight lines that many astronomers believed were canali, artificial canals. This idea spread rapidly, sparking the imagination that Mars was home to an intelligent civilization fighting against the harshness of its environment by building vast canal systems. For a century, that notion inspired countless works of literature and science fiction. Writers like H.G. Wells and Edgar Rice Burroughs painted vibrant worlds where Earthlings encountered the mysterious Martian civilization, sometimes hostile, sometimes romantic, but always haunting. The War of the Worlds was not merely an entertaining story. It reflected humanity's deep anxieties about war, conflict, and the fragility of civilization when faced with an alien enemy. At the same time, adventurous tales of a Mars full of deserts and ancient cities carved the red planet into our collective imagination as a land both deadly and mysterious. What is fascinating is that the more closely we observed, the more we realized that those canals were just optical illusions, products of our eyes and imagination. Yet, that myth became deeply ingrained in popular culture, creating a legacy that could not be erased. Even as modern science dismissed the theories of Martian civilization, its image continued to nourish imagination through films, comics, and works of art. Today, as we send probes and rovers to Mars, a new chapter is being written. If once people dreamed of fiery red cities under a hazy sky, now we find another kind of beauty, the beauty of silence, of ancient time, preserved in every rock. The images sent back by the rovers, wheels rolling across the sands, lenses aimed at the strangely blue Martian sunset, have transformed a world that once existed only in myth into a tangible reality. It is both as close as an image on our screens and as distant as the minutes it takes for light to travel from it to Earth. This transformation does not diminish Mars's allure. On the contrary, it makes the red planet a symbol of the future. If in the past Mars stood for war and bloodshed, then in the present and the future, it carries dreams of exploration, of life, and of hope for a second home. Debates about terraforming, about the ethical responsibility of altering an entire planet, or about the possibility of finding traces of microbial life, all stem from a deep yearning to turn what was once myth into reality. In that sense, Mars is a mirror reflecting humanity. It tells the story of what we once thought, once dreamed, and where we are heading. Its red once evoked destruction, but now it ignites the hope of renewal. When one day humans truly set foot on this planet, that moment will not only be a scientific milestone, it will be the fusion of mythic past and practical future, of imagination and discovery, of aspiration and perseverance. Thus, Mars has never been just a planet. It is a living story, written over thousands of years by mythology, literature, science, and even unfulfilled dreams. And perhaps that story will continue to be written forever, as long as we still look up into the night sky. When looking at Earth from Mars, we realize a simple yet shocking truth. Everything we know, everything we love, is contained within a pale blue dot floating in the cosmic night. From tens of millions of miles away, all borders, conflicts, and daily noise on our mother planet suddenly become meaningless. Instead, we see a single home, fragile yet extraordinary, as if cradled by nothingness. This very perspective has led many philosophers and astronauts to say that exploring the universe is not merely a scientific conquest, but also a journey to rediscover humanity's shared identity. But if Earth seen from afar brings us a sense of unity, then Mars, right beneath the observer's feet, awakens a deep yearning for the ability to reach beyond current limits. The thin sky, weaker sunlight, and massive dust storms shrouding entire continents are not only physical challenges, but also tests of will. Setting foot on the red planet is not simply about expanding maps. It is proof of our capacity to overcome fear, to turn what once existed only in myth and literature into reality. For centuries, Mars has played the role of a mirror reflecting human imagination. From the canals that 19th century astronomers once claimed to see to alien invasions in science fiction novels, the red planet has been both a stage for anxieties and a launch pad for the desire to explore. Today, as robots roll across its surface and send back millions of images, the mystery no longer lies in fantastical tales, but in profound scientific questions. Could there be microbial life beneath its frozen soil? Did the planet once have oceans and a temperate climate like Earth? And if so, would its fate serve as a warning for us? It is hard not to notice the parallel between Mars and Earth. A world that once had flowing water and a thicker atmosphere, but gradually became a cold desert, could be a mirror of our own planet's future if we fail to care for it. Every photo of a dried valley or dust-covered glacier is like an unfinished diary entry, waiting for us to read further. And the question is not only, was anyone ever there, but also, what can we learn to protect our own home? Even so, the allure of Mars goes far beyond warnings. It stirs in us an almost primal urge, the urge to leave the cradle. Just as our ancestors once crossed oceans, not because they knew what awaited them, but because curiosity would not let them stop. If Earth was once the spark of great migrations, then Mars is the next destination in that natural flow. However, dreaming of Mars is one thing, turning the dream into reality is another. The technology to bring humans there is nearly the extreme limit of human intellect and perseverance. Every detail, from creating sustainable systems for recycling air, water, and energy, to protecting astronauts from radiation, requires unprecedented solutions. Yet it is here that the true value of the journey emerges. It drives technology forward, leading to innovations that may later serve Earth. Satellite internet, clean energy, micro medical technology, all could be byproducts of the effort to set foot on the red planet. Beyond that, Mars carries within it a spiritual value. Imagine a child in the next century, looking up at the night sky, knowing that out there, on a distant planet, humans are also living, sowing seeds, and building a community. That thought not only expands each individual's vision, but also rewrites the definition of homeland. From homeland as a village, then a nation, then Earth itself, Mars will compel us to recognize that humanity's true homeland is the universe. And then perhaps one day the question will no longer be, can we reach Mars? But how will we choose to live once we are there? Will we continue to divide, to fight, to carry old wounds with us, or will we see the new planet as a chance to begin anew? Mars, in its deepest meaning, is not only a physical destination, but also a moral and philosophical test for humankind. Finally, when we return to the image of Earth, small and suspended in the Martian sky, a circle is complete. For the journey to conquer the universe is not to escape our current home, but to learn to love it more, to cherish it more. And just like tiny dots of light on the infinite black canvas, our presence on both planets will stand as proof that in the harsh loneliness of the cosmos, humanity never stopped searching, never stopped reaching. But science, no matter how precise and meticulous, is only half of the story. The other half is the human experience, the way we, fragile creatures carrying the entire history of Earth's evolution, confront a world that does not welcome us, yet stirs in us a profound curiosity. On Mars, every step reminds us that we are entering a new chapter of existence. The red dust clinging to our boots is not just lifeless mineral grains, but proof that humanity has dared to cross boundaries once thought impossible. Imagine being one of the first explorers, stepping out of the habitat module after months adrift in space. Sunlight is barely half as strong as on Earth, casting long, ghostly shadows. The sky glows with pale pinks tinged with orange, unlike the familiar blue that has cradled your mind since childhood. You hear no bird song, no rustling leaves, only the steady rhythm of your own breath echoing inside the helmet. In that moment, you realize survival here requires more than technology. It demands spiritual resilience and an unprecedented capacity to adapt. Mars does not easily reveal its secrets. Vast dunes may look as if they were sculpted yesterday, yet they have stood still for millions of years. A stone you pick up may have once witnessed the first rainfall on this planet, droplets that carve traces now silenced by time. Every rock, every layer of sediment is a page of history that scientists must patiently decipher, and it is this patience that highlights one of the greatest values of science. There are no quick answers, only tiny clues, gradually guiding us toward the bigger picture. What makes Mars compelling is not only the possibility that water once flowed there, but the profound question, did it ever cradle life? On Earth, life leaves traces everywhere, in the atmosphere, in rocks, even in our DNA. But on Mars, signs are fragile, fleeting, like whispers hard to grasp. Organic molecules found in the soil, subtle variations in methane, or the shapes of certain sedimentary rocks, all are suggestive yet inconclusive. This is the game of patience, where every piece of evidence is filtered through the lens of scientific skepticism. And here we touch upon a deeply human dimension, the longing for companionship in the cosmos. Human nature is not only to ask what or how, but to yearn for an answer to, is there anyone else? Mars, the closest world with the potential to have once harbored life, becomes a mirror reflecting our cosmic loneliness. If we were to find even the faintest trace of past life, perhaps just a fossilized microbe, it would be enough to transform humanity's view of its place in the universe. But what if we find nothing at all? Perhaps that, too, is an answer of great importance. It would remind us how precious life on Earth truly is and how rare. A planet with water, an atmosphere, and surface conditions somewhat familiar, yet devoid of life, would show us that our cradle is not only fortunate, but miraculous. In that profound silence, Mars becomes a mirror for humanity to see itself, fragile yet resilient, small yet daring to dream of distant horizons. On another level, Mars also opens a window to the future. Will there one day be settlements here, domes glowing against the darkness, hydroponic fields of green rising in the red desert? Will children be born whose lineage belongs to both planets? The idea sounds like science fiction, but bit by bit, with every mission, we are making it real. Today's rovers are like trailblazers, mapping terrain and seeking resources to prepare for those who will follow. Yet, we cannot ignore the ethical challenge of colonizing Mars. We bring with us our microbes, our culture, and the mistakes that have scarred Earth. Will we be wise enough to create a second Earth that is better, or will we repeat cycles of exploitation and destruction? This question is not only for engineers or scientists, but for all of us, those who will decide how humanity writes the next chapter of its shared story. When you think about it, the silence of Mars no longer feels frightening, but becomes a space waiting to be filled with imagination, responsibility, and dreams. a space not only for science, but for art, philosophy, and culture. For in the end, going to Mars is not just about setting foot on another planet. It is about the journey of understanding ourselves, who we are, what we need to survive, and what legacy we wish to leave in the cosmos. Mars, in its stillness, in its thin air and red dust, whispers an invitation. It does not compel, it does not seduce. It simply waits quietly for us to be brave enough to enter its story. And when we do, when Earth becomes nothing more than a pale dot in the night sky, we will realize the journey was never just about reaching a new world, but about learning to see our old home with new eyes. In that distance, our love for Earth will grow deeper, and in that love, we will find the reason to keep dreaming, to keep exploring. The images of Mars that we often see, the dry valleys, the endless stretches of red dunes, or the gigantic volcanoes, are not merely the portrait of a distant world. They are like fragments of a mirror reflecting Earth, the history of our own planet, and even the future that may come. There we find traces of ancient flows now left only as scars, reminding us that water, something we take for granted as eternal, can vanish, leaving behind a desolate and silent surface. Each mark seems to whisper that nature never stands still, that life, if it ever sprouted on Mars, must also have struggled and perhaps been defeated by time and harshness. What is strange is that within this stillness there remains a secret rhythm. The ice at the poles breathes along with the seasons. The winds carry dust swirling around the planet to form a voiceless symphony. When spacecraft capture the sight of a bluish sunset fading in a crimson sky, we feel as though we are listening to an ancient melody the universe has composed solely for this place. It is neither loud nor clear, yet it resonates in our imagination, in our unceasing desire to understand the worlds beyond. Every mission sent to Mars is not only a scientific experiment, it is also like a diary page humanity writes into the great book of the cosmos. From the first blurry, grainy images sent back to today's sharp panoramas, we witness the growth of humankind itself. They do not only give us information, they give us the feeling that we are truly walking through a long story, where each generation continues the quest with the same yearning to explore. That patience, that continuity, is proof that the imagination of humankind does not fade, even before infinite coldness. And then, in the smallest of details, we encounter something beyond the scope of science. Poetry. Beauty does not lie in grandeur, but in stillness. A dune covered in white frost at night, the faint streak of Phobos gliding across the sky, or simply the way sunlight tilts as it sets behind red mountain ridges, all of it paints a kind of aesthetic untouched by human hands. It is raw, primordial beauty, and precisely that makes us feel humble. When people dream of one day setting foot on Mars, we do not think only of technology and engineering. Those dreams also carry within them a human longing to seek connection with the universe, to test the limits of ourselves, and to continue writing the story our ancestors began when they first looked up at the night sky. We imagine the first explorers bending down to pick up a dusty red stone, leaving their footprints on the surface, and in that moment, they will represent not just themselves, but all of humanity. Yet that journey, if it comes, will also remind us of fragility. From Mars, when we look back at Earth, we will not see nations, cities, or borders. We will see only a tiny speck of light in the darkness, holding all the history, languages, love, and sorrow of humankind. It is a moment that makes us realize every conflict and every achievement is fleeting, while the universe continues to turn on a scale of billions of years. That comparison humbles us, yet at the same time makes us cherish more deeply the value of what we have. Perhaps what makes Mars truly special is not only the possibility that it once harbored life, but the way it compels us to reflect on life on Earth. When we see the dried riverbeds of the red planet, we think of the rivers of our homeland. When we observe its thin atmosphere, we wonder about the delicate balance of the air we breathe. And when we see that it lost its magnetic shield, we are reminded that the invisible shields around Earth are what keep us alive in safety. Each observation, each piece of data, is a reminder. Our planet is more precious than any treasure. In a world that grows ever more noisy and rushed, perhaps Mars offers us the most paradoxical gift: silence. There are no cars, no crowds, only wind, dust, and time. That silence creates distance, allowing us to breathe deeply and realize that sometimes meaning does not lie in chasing speed, but in pausing and observing. Looking at the curve of an ancient valley, the erosion marks on a cliff, we see millions of years of planetary history deposited in each grain of dust. Mars, in the end, is a teacher. It teaches us endurance, for it has persisted for billions of years without abundant life. It teaches us patience, for its changes unfold slower than we can imagine. And it teaches us humility, for no matter how advanced we become, humanity remains only a very small part of the vast universe. The red planet, in its strangeness and familiarity, still whispers a message that knowledge lies not only in conquering, but also in listening.